Hello. I thought today we'd look at how do you actually get into recording if you've got no money. It's quite common now for people to say, look, I want to record, but I can't afford a decent interface. I can't afford a decent microphone. What do I do? Is it impossible? Well, no, it's not really. So I've put together something here that might prove it's rubbish or it might prove it's really good. I don't know yet because I haven't listened. I've grabbed an SM57. So we know it's a good microphone, but it's a dynamic, which is a low output mic, and that sort of seeds gloom and doom in people's brains because they look at the interfaces and think, well, hang on, if I've got a cheap interface and I've got a dynamic mic, is this really going to be any good? So I thought we'll have it a go. So what I've dug up is this. Now, this is not a Focusrite. This is a Chinese copy of a Focusrite. It looks extremely similar, and some of the things are very, very similar. So probably its history is a little bit dubious. But it's a cheap interface, cost about 40 quid, came from AliExpress. I bought it just to see how good it is. It's 2 inputs. It seems to work fine on Windows. It seems to work okay on this Mac that I'm using here to record. So all I've done is just plug it in. The slightly weird thing is that the Mac describes this as headphone. So clearly it thinks it's talking to an audio device designed to replay. But I just enabled the record settings and it works. Now, the knob on the front is the usual snag, first snag. The gain setting is just over 3/4. I mean, it's got a little bit more travel to go, but it gets quite noisy if I go onto that last bit. So it's at 3/4, and if that's not enough, and the meters are telling me that it isn't enough, because I'm talking quite a long way away from the microphone. Now, that's just the way I like to do it. But of course, if I was singing into it with my lips on that mic, it'll be fine. If I've got that stuffed in front of a guitar cab, that'll be fine. But realistically, it's a low output mic and it's feeding into a preamp that's probably not got the best noise figures in the world. But is it usable? Well, we'll have to wait and see. Just after we've recorded this bit, I'll go and have a listen and see what I think. But realistically, it's taking its power from the 5-volt rail, coming in from the USB. So I'm going into one of the combi inputs on the front, so I've got an XLR going in there. It's also obviously being combi able to have guitars and line level sources plugged into it. But we've just got the simplest connection going. The XLR cable from the microphone straight into here, 3/4 gain, about a foot and a bit away from the microphone with my normal voice, and let's see what happens. Now, let's switch from the SM7B that you're listening to me on now, the normal mic I use for comparisons, and we'll go across the 57. Now, the 57 at this distance is the same distance as the SM7B from my Mac. So any differences that you are now hearing realistically are going to be created by this preamp. So if you've heard the noise go up, then you know where it's coming from. And then you can decide if that's okay for you or whether it's a sort of deal breaker and this is a pile of poo. But I don't know. The other thing we're going to do in this video is plug this plug here into the normal interface that I've got on this system here, which is a firewire Presonus, because the Mac quite likes that. It's elderly, but I quite like it. So we'll switch across to the firewire Presonus and see what the differences are there. And then I'll also slap the same cable into a Midas M32 that I've got, which has got some rather nice preamps in it. It's a live mixer, but it uses those Midas preamps that sort of got a decent reputation. So we'll see what happens with the 3 stages. So, I mean, we've got dead cheap, we've got the Presonus firewire, it's a FirePod, that one is elderly but good, and then we'll swap across to the Midas 32 and see what the differences are. So hang on a minute and I'll get the firewire one working next. Right, so Presonus all fired up. We're now recording into that. Gain setting is about the same, 3/4 of the way around. I've not gone into that last little bit because I know that that brings in extra noise. So we've got the same distance from the mic. Better do the comparison, I guess, just to make sure you know what's going. We're on the SM7B, so let's switch to the Presonus. We're on the Presonus now. So this is the Presonus, which in its day was a great preamp. I rather liked it, and I sort of moved it from the other studio to here because I'm using a Mac in this particular studio. So we're recording now using the preamp that's over there in that rack. And it's different. Already I can detect that the actual gain it's got is greater. So we don't need so much makeup. All in all, it's always been a decent preamp. But I don't really know if it is sort of special. But, you know, it just does the job. I'm not really interested in these really clever ones because I'm not a great believer in sort of fairy dust. But that's just me, and a lot of people will tell me I'm completely wrong, and that's perfectly okay. I understand if you don't sort of go along my sort of train of thought and think that some of these esoteric preamps really do marvels for your sound. I'm sure they do, I just can't hear it, so I'm not really interested in following that path, never have been. I suppose what we should do now is do exactly the same thing with the Midas preamps and just see what the conclusions are, if we can actually hear the difference. So hang on a minute and I'll get that sort of arranged. So we're back again on the SM7B, so let's switch across to the 57 now, and this time we've got the 57 and it's going into the preamps that are in the Midas 32. So that's the slightly better spec preamps. Lots of people say nice things about them. They just work for me. So now we've got the 57. So what I will do in the edit is just normalise all this speech so it hits the same point. And then the background noise should go up and down. And that's the sort of theory behind this test. Going from the cheapie to the Presonus, mid-price, a bit old, to the Midas 32 preamps, which are sort of, you know, the only ones that are labelled special. How special they are, I really don't know, don't particularly care. They just do the job. So now you've actually got a cheap mic and you can hear it on 3 different interface standards. I suppose what we should do is record a bit of guitar or something like that, just to give you a bit of an example of a 57 and what that sounds like on a sort of brightish guitar. You know, will that do the job? So that's the next stage. I'll just set that up for you and we'll have a go. Well, there you go. That's the SM57, still at a distance, through the Presonus. And this time, nothing moved apart from the microphone is now plugged into the cheap Chinese interface, the 40 quid one. Same distance. So there you go, back to the SM7B now. So that's the three interfaces at three different sort of levels, and you can compare. You know, can you live with that cheap one? Does the spending more money actually get you something tangible? It's a pretty tricky test, really, because, you know, most people don't use dynamic microphones at a distance. That's just me, and I always do. So you can hear the impact it's going to have and the sort of stress that it'll put on a preamp. But I really don't think that the audio quality, in terms of, you know, what did that guitar sound like? Does it sound vastly different on the different levels of preamp? There's a difference, of course there is. But I think to get you going, I'm not sure that spending huge amounts of money on interfaces is actually that good. Now, practically speaking, if you've got an interface that's a bit noisy, you just record closer. I mean, that's just the practical side of it, isn't it? You don't stress it, so you don't have to have that gain turned up as loud. And if you look at people who use SM7Bs on YouTube, they're all using them really close in. There's only idiots like me who do it at a distance. But that's okay. If you've got noisy preamps, and because I'm ancient, I mean, I remember plugging SM57s into a reel-to-reel tape recorder, you know, you could get away with it. It's just how things are. But I'm just struggling a bit when people say, oh, you know, a certain interface gives you a worse sound. Well, they're all a bit different sounding, but I'm not sure if that's actually a quality difference or not. You'll have to make your own minds up. You've heard these three preamps, and now perhaps, you know, you can judge it a bit better with your hearing. See what you think. And if you still think the more expensive ones are great, that's lovely when you've got the money to buy them. But a lot of people don't have that luxury. They're skint. Buying a mic and buying a preamp is a big investment for them, and you just got to be a bit careful in what you're going to get and what you expect. See you on the next video. Look after yourselves. Take care.